Alright, let this start up. Right, so, alright. إن الحمد لله وكفاه والصلاة والسلام على رسوله المصطفى وعلى عباده الذين ارتضى ومن بهداهم اهتدى وبآثار أهل المدينة اقتفى وبعد فالسلام الله على القوم أهلا وسهلا بكم ومرحبا bienvenidos a todos Juan Ying Layth Bakhair Ragle people and of course Swagatam. Right, so what is going on? What is going on, people? Alright. What are the fitan and fasad saying? The fitan and fasad, people, the fitan and fasad. Right, so what are my demons telling me? As since the myth has it that demons inspire me, they impart their knowledge to me. So in that case, let's see, people, what's going on. What's the waswasa saying? Right, well, I've got some drink. You know, somebody said to me, they said, why is it that you drink from a pint glass? Why? Zalmo. I mean, seriously, to what extent will people object? क्या कहें ये दुनिया वालों को जो आखिरी सांस पर भी एतराज करते हैं. These people will not let you be. Right, so what's going on, people? What's going on? Can I befriend the demons too? Hell yeah. So according to part of the alleged pact of mine with the demons is that I must do the devil sign. Alright, there you go. To my homies, the demons out there. It's amazing what kind of a fairy tale people believe in. And that's their actual belief system. It's a shame. And some of these people can otherwise be referred to sometimes as intelligent people. It's embarrassing, people. It's embarrassing. Right. Rais, you was my teacher in school. Was I? Rais, that name rings a bell. You're doing it. Right, so what else is going down? Let's take some questions. Some of the things I'll be looking at today, a bit later on, will be... Right, I'll be taking a look at the hadith that a lot of people use. They state that the Prophet allegedly said that, and it's transmitted as in the Prophet taught. So it's Sayyidina Ali's hadith about that if this deen were to be built upon the voice of reason, then we ought to wipe the lower part of the khuf, of the sock, and not the upper part, but the deen is not built on reason. So there's this athar is the technical word, but it's you can call it a hadith generically speaking. It's a teaching, alleged teaching of Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anh. So we'll take a little look at that later on. Whoa, a little look at that later on. Almost a tongue twister. So, and we'll go into dismantling and showing that once we dismantle it, this one fraud, you know, this one this one not authentic, you know, this one not nice. So we'll show that how that hadith is actually unacceptable, weak, ضعيف. We'll come to that a little later on. Also, we'll take a little look at there's this Bollywood actress, Zaira Wasim G from Bollywood. Those of you that know her from the movie Dangal and Secret Superstar. So she's a young actress, won awards and things like that. Muslim, Kashmiri, but she recently, just yesterday I believe, or unless it was the day before, but I just saw it yesterday, she made this kind of social media statement. She released a statement across several platforms, dissociating herself from the world of Bollywood. I mean, and somebody may say, well, what's so important about that? Well, why does it get discussed on Monday nights with Mufti? So, it gets discussed because she cites as her reasons for leaving religion, and how her iman, in her words, has become compromised. This then triggered an entire storm, and we'll talk about that and my thoughts, what I feel about this statement of Zaira and her actions. What do I think? Chalo, somebody may say, Abe tu kon hai? Who are you to be? But since every other ghair out there, every other Gangu Teli out there is giving an opinion, chalo, we might as well just, there's that saying in Urdu, ke tu kon, main khamkha. Some people are having a discussion, and some third person just gave his comment. It's a bit like that meme. You've got that black guy in the studio, and he says, sorry, who are you? What's your name? Yeah, just stick to you. You've probably seen the meme. And it's a bit like that. So he gives his opinion, and they say, well, who are you? And he says, no, I'm just. I'm just. So anyway, people, so I will be speaking on the Zaira Wasim issue a little later on. And then maybe if there's any other masala for the masala segment, Mufti Masala, we can chat about that as well. What's happening with the Hasanat development and the Mufti Menk naughties. So we'll speak a little bit about that a little later on. Right, so what is Islam's view on abortion? Philip, ese, ¿qué está pasando? ¿Qué está pasando? What's going down? Philip, I don't know if Hesse is Spanish, by the way. I'm just blagging that it is. But what does Islam have to say about abortion? What does Islam have to say about abortion? What do we think Islam has to say about abortion? Let's have a democratic approach. Let's vote. No, right, okay. Abortion. What is the Islamic view? So I discussed this a little while back, and some people got offended. I don't know why. Some guys got offended. I'm thinking, well, I don't know why you're getting offended. The only reason, I mean, you're just a case. You yourself embody an argument for abortion. Had of your parents sensibly taken that choice, they'd have saved humanity and the Homo sapiens species some disappointment today. Nevertheless, abortion. Right, now, in my understanding, and I'm saying my understanding, and some people say, why does he say in my understanding? Abe, should I say in your dad's understanding? Of course I'm going to say in my understanding. What a dumb objection. Why does he say in my understanding? Well, that's because I'm the one talking. Of course, it's going to be in my understanding. So, chalo, this is my humbleness in my understanding, right? First, right, okay, so before I go into my understanding, let's give I'll give a summary, a backdrop, and then an explanation, okay? And an elaborate explanation covering some of the some of the issues that are often asked. So, I believe abortion is permissible. So, just to sum it up, it is permissible. Now, and I don't believe people need to be micromanaged. So some people will say to me, yes, it's permissible under this, give the caveat, give the caveats out there that this is the condition to make it permissible. I'm saying, yes, those conditions are commonsensical. Nobody takes an abortion or undergoes an abortion for a joke. So there's no need really trying to micromanage people in saying, well, oh, but have you really thought about it? Well, what do you think a person? Nobody just gets up and says, well, what shall I do today? I haven't got much on. I know I'll just get an abortion. I mean, it doesn't work like that. So whoever is undertaking an abortion is obviously undertaking it because they've thought it through. That there's going to be certain problems, whatever the problems are, but they've thought it through. So I am not in the game of trying to micromanage people, and I don't believe Islam is interested in micromanaging people. The clergy often are trying to micromanage people because it's an attempt to exercise power over people. So it's permissible. Now I'll go into what the ulama of the past had said. So the ulama of the past, when discussing matters of abortion, and this, when I'm saying past now, I'm talking up to 1,000 years ago. Some prior to that, okay? So we're talking a very long time ago. So keep that in mind, people, because it's important. Why is it important? Because you have to remember, how was abortion performed in that day and age? That's an important point to keep in mind, because these things were often life-threatening. I mean, they can still be today in certain, but often there's a lot of safety nets present today. So a person, it's not usually, inshallah, it's not usually for most people who are stuck in such difficult predicaments, it's not life-threatening. Right, so the scholars of the past, the madhabs that you have, the four schools of Sunni thought, you've got the Hanafiya, the Malikiya, the Shafi'iyya, and the Hanabila. Right, so these four schools of Sunni thought. The Hanafiya and the Hanabila seem to have, these two madhabs, the Hanafi madhab and the Hanbali madhab, seem to be quite clear in saying that there is a kind of grace period in terminating the pregnancy up to 4 months, 120 days. Now, so that's the Hanafi madhab and the Hanbali madhab. They seem to, and they do have reasons. They do stress the reasons. Oh, it should be some kind of reason. There should be, but the reasons are quite arbitrary and they fluctuate. So they go from, which everybody agrees, life-threatening, nobody has a problem with that, to, it could be causing certain difficulties, it could not be, right up until it's just family planning and, it's not the right time, or as in this day and age, people will say maybe the woman is studying, maybe she's got a career, maybe it's just, she just doesn't want a pregnancy right now, it's going to cause a lot of other issues or whatever it is. And they disagree with the actual conditions. They all agree on the fact it's life-threatening, but they disagree on the others. That said, the madhabs do allow up to 120 days. They base this on the hadith of ensoulment, that the soul is blown into, it's infused into the fetus. And then in the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ has said, after 40 days the soul is blown in. It's infused ensouled into the fetus. And they say, well, that's fine. Now, in certain riwayat, it says after 40, then 40, then 40, the soul is breathed into the fetus. So that's where they get this number 120 from. The Malikiya, often in the past, many of them went with the 40 days. Because they said, well, the riwayat of the hadith, most of them just said 40. Some said 40, 40, 40. Maybe that was an emphasis of just 40. So we're going to stick on the safe side, and they went with 40. And many of the Shafi'iyya also went with 40, but some of them took it to a higher level and started to say, well, the moment, like Imam Ghazali and a few other Shafi'iyya started to say, the moment there's been conception and fertilization, it is haram. Unless it was life-threatening. Life-threatening. It is haram to have an abortion, categorically. So you have some extreme ulama like that, holding that view. So that's what they've based it on, this hadith. Now, what is my understanding on all... And first of all, so after, just to add to that, after 120 days, so after 4 months, they pretty much agree that an abortion is not allowed. So that's their understanding of the past. And remember, people were saying this about 1,000 years ago. Now keep that in mind, okay, because it is important. So sometimes people have asked a question like, oh, what if a woman was raped and she was pregnant and she didn't manage to get an abortion up until after 4 months? And many of these scholars they struggled to give grounds of permissibility, because they said, oh well, the scholars said up until 120 days, and now that's passed, that's it, and we can't say anything, and you're going to have to keep the pregnancy and so on. So that's the background to this mas'ala. However, today, in this day and age, there are other ulama, there will be certain ulama from Al-Azhar and other places who have given the fatwa that, look, it doesn't work like that anymore. Nowadays, there's a lot of techniques in place, a lot of medical practice. If there was an issue and an abortion was required, it can be performed, and it doesn't have to be restricted to 120 days, whatever is deemed medically safe. I'm in line with that view, that whatever is deemed medically safe, they can go with. Okay, they do not need to be restricted to 120 days. I don't buy the whole thing of, that is the soul and so on, and you've now killed a soul, whereas if it was prior to 120 days, then it wasn't a soul. And I think this argument, to me, is just very weak, because they amongst themselves all disagree. According to them, you see, the same guilt could be afforded to these ulama, the Hanafis and the Hanbalis, what the Shafi'is say. They say, oh, but the soul is after 40 days. So you've still killed a soul. And so I think, look, there's no point emotionally guilt-tripping people. It's up to them. You do not need to micromanage people, okay? If people choose to terminate the pregnancy, in my understanding, they can do so. I'm not saying that they need to do so, okay? There's a big difference between saying that something is permissible in Islam and something must be done. So I'm not saying that it must be done, abortions must be done. That would be ridiculous. It would be absurd. What I'm saying is it's their own choice. Okay? And that's my understanding. Now people will say, well, up until what point can this be done? Is it one day before? Is it one day? This, and they'll try and guilt trip you with certain things. I would say, look, listen, everybody agrees that even though we do accept that there is life there. I'm not saying, people will try and say that, do you not recognize there is life? There is life, but then life is a spectrum. See, plants are alive. That's life. Animals are alive. That's life. Humans and a fetus is not, in my understanding, the same as an actual human being. It is in the process of becoming a human being. People may disagree with me, that's fine, but that's my perspective. I feel that a fetus is in the developmental stages of becoming a human being. So it has not yet reached that state. Now, if it was terminated en route, that sounds a bit lethal. If it was terminated, like I am the Terminator from the future. I'll be back, right? So I don't mean it but if it was aborted for some reason, then I don't feel it's the same as saying, oh, it's okay to murder someone. To me, that's a dumb analogy. To me, that's a dumb analogy, okay? To some people, it may make sense. They may say, yeah, that's just the same as getting a 3-year-old child and murdering a 3-year-old child. And I'll think, like, I don't know what you're smoking, mate. But I think either you can pass it around and everybody can smoke it, and then we can be on the same level. No, so to me, these things are permissible, and people can't. And I know Americans especially are very passionate on the issue of abortion. In all honesty, I don't know why. I don't know why the Americans are so passionate about abortion, but they seem to be really, really passionate about it. But I guess each to their own. Right, so let's move on. So I hope that summed it up. Abortion, to sum it up, I believe it is permissible, and I believe you do not need to micromanage people. You do not need to run a set of rules and regulations by them. They understand what it is. Nobody does these things for a joke. There must have been a reason that was valid, that was pressing for them to go and do that. There must have been. So, okay. Right, let's move on, people. Is it possible to pray Asr earlier? Muhammad Bah. Bah? What kind of a name is Bah? Well, is it possible to pray Asr earlier? Well, Muhammad Bah, right. It is possibly. You can bring Asr into Dhuhr time if there was a need, like some kind of urgency or something. You can combine the prayers, and you can by combining, you can either bring it forward or you can delay the Dhuhr into Asr time. Likewise with Maghrib and Isha, you can do the same. Right. Frowdy Frubbery asks a question. If you get time. Oh, we've got Ustad Adam Kelwick. Sheikh Adam Kelwick is in the house. Ahlan wa sahlan, Sheikh. Those of you who, I'm sure you're all familiar with Sheikh Adam. If you're not, you need to be following Sheikh Adam's page, keeping in touch with him. A great scholar who's on the ground doing grassroots efforts, people, humanitarian efforts. Often, I believe he may even currently be in Yemen right now. He's often in Yemen doing a lot of charity work. I always receive his updates, his small videos, and I think you're a legend, Ustad. You're a legend. I mean, you're doing things which, if I'm to be honest, I cannot do. Okay, for no reason except just being pathetically lazy. I guess I cannot do these things. So you remind us of what we ought to be like. So hayyakallah, hayyakallah. Right now, okay, coming back to the question, if you get time, if Ibrahim was not thrown into the fire, why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tell the fire to be cool? Because most likely the fire would have been impacting, as in if he was tied up somewhere, it would have still caused heat. In the house, alright, Mufti Abu Layth clips. Doing it. Is music halal haram? I mean normal music. So I'm not talking about music containing foul lyrics. I'm talking about normal music. यार ये normal क्या होता है? What is normal music? ¿Qué es eso? What is that? You see, music is permissible, people. It is not haram. Anybody who says music is haram must bring a clear, conclusive dalil from the Quran and Sunnah to prove and establish that it is haram. There is not a single, not one, la, wala wahid. There isn't a single Sahih Hadith saying that music is haram. Not a single. Oof. Not a single, let alone a couple. There isn't even a single Sahih Hadith to say music is haram. So, there are many Hadith which are all weak. So, yes, people believe in it, that it's haram, which is fine. Why do people believe that music is haram if there is not a single Sahih Hadith to prove it's haram? I've explained this before. It's actually quite easy. That once you understand the ontology of religion, you start to realize that people presume religion is something which has come to, that religion by its very nature is anti-desires. It is anti-luxury. It is anti-entertainment. It is anti... I'm not saying it is, but people, there's an underlying presumption that people go with, that they readily buy. So this, it doesn't even, you know, this kind of stuff, you don't need to be Muslim to have that underlying presumption. So this is what I've referred to previously as the ontology of religion. Like if you went to people and asked them, what do you think religion would demand from you? Religion with a capital R. Now, without even having studied a specific religion, they will tell you certain things. Like they will say, my understanding is religion, with a capital R, would demand worship. It would demand rituals. It would demand sacrifice. It would demand... So these are things that people can just come up with without having any knowledge of a religion. And what they would assume is that religion is a form of asceticism. It's a form of non-dunyawiness, okay, not being of the world. So a kind of immaterialness. So they, like a hermit, that kind of asceticism, becoming ascetic. So entertainment, they would assume religion does not like entertainment. Without having studied religion, people can straight away arrive at that understanding that religion must not like. Similarly, they would assume that religion does not like desires. Hence, it's interesting, like sexual activity is deemed, it's kind of looked down upon in many religions. Now, ironically, in Islam, actually it's not, it's quite neutral, but in later Islamic development, like especially in the last 200 years, since the British kind of and colonialism, a lot of Muslims have taken on that kind of Christian value of demonizing sex as well. So within Islam, they see sex as something embarrassing or dirty, or they see these things now, but this is an inherited kind of belief system that many Muslims inherited whilst under colonial rule by the West, and then ironically the West actually moved away from these values and the Muslims got stuck with them. But then in a surprise, almost in a shocking turn of events, the Muslims, instead of debunking them, Islamicized them and retrospectively projected them onto Islam. So that's an interesting study in and of itself, I think. So people can easily arrive at these conclusions, and music is something that they would assume surely must be haram. But there's nothing in Islam to say music is haram. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. And there's nothing to say that bad lyrics are haram. Bad lyrics are not haram. Sure, they're not, like, there's a time and place for everything. You know, there's etiquettes, adab. Okay, so we're not stupid. You know, people are human beings. I mean, they have a sensibility about things. They understand, like, so there's etiquettes for different place. There's etiquettes in how you talk to certain people. You're not going to speak to your parents in the way that you speak to your friends. You're not going to turn up to work the way you, I don't know, get ready to go to sleep. You're not going to... So, I mean, people recognize that there's a time and a place. لِكُلِّ مَقَامٍ مَقَال, as it's said in Arabic, that everything has a set time and place for things and an etiquette to go with it. So, yes, musical lyrics, the lyrics now, you're not going to, for example, use explicit lyrics around children. People generally don't do that. You're not going to use them around in front of your parents, for example. It doesn't matter how old you are. People generally won't do things like that. They have a sense of etiquette, have some decency about them. But lyrics, explicit lyrics in and of themselves are not haram. I mean, even sexual and all kinds of things, they're not haram. I mean, they may be not liked by the Sharia. I mean, it wouldn't encourage things like that, but it wouldn't deem it haram. Haram is a very high bar, people. And some people have made it way too easy. They're trigger happy on haram. Haram, 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 haram. This is not how haram actually was. Haram is a very high kind of measure. So, lyrics about things like sex or crime or fighting or drugs or things like this are not good, but they necessarily, I mean, they're not good, but and people might look down on them, but then that doesn't make it haram. So you have a lot of Arabic poetry, which is all, you know, just completely layered with just sex and wars and battles and fighting and killing and pride and it was and this poetry has been treasured by the Arabs and by Muslims. Some of it was read in the mosque of the Prophet. They would read it just to chill out. Like, so in Sahih Bukhari they say that we would sit in the masjid and often recite Jahiliyyah poetry amongst ourselves. Hama, alright, how you doing, chilling, alright, people, Rafa, you're doing it. Those of you tuning in, you can click like, click share, people, get it out there. So, right now, somebody said, I think music is a red herring. I'm not sure what you mean by that. I mean, a red herring to what? I'm just answering the question and just explaining that there's a misconception that certain things are not haram, and including lyrics which are explicit are not haram. So I hope that makes some sense. Cool. Somebody, what's this? Why is the aura of an amma the same as a man? Isn't that conflicting with the emphasis, the role of hijab for women? Free women have to cover up while slave girls are allowed to walk around with no shirt on. Now that's the place where all the fuqaha, all the scholars need to hang out. They're like, we're just holding a dars here. And you got all these slave girls prancing about topless. Wow, what a life those people lived. Ah, well, religion, huh? You know, this topic of slave girls is a really fascinating one from many aspects. Obviously, all the guys now are just absolutely tuned in. They're like, what's wrong with you? This is Islam. It's Islam we're learning, God damn it. See, the topic of slave girls is it's so kind of revealing in many ways. Revealing. Sorry, Freudian slip. It's so telling in many ways that most the scholars, not all, most the scholars, the way they dealt with the topic of the slave girl, right? It's so strange because they just kind of just all went like, they just legitimized everything and nobody had a problem with it. It's just like, yeah, and the other guy's like, of course, that's common sense. And the other sheikh is like, duh, of course it's common sense. It's not only common sense, it's Islamic. And the next muhaddith said, duh, I even think I remember a hadith about it. This is, but it's so amazing because look, when it comes to it, when you think about it, when it comes to it, the crux is, when it comes to the crux of the matter, it was simply, really, if we're going to be honest, it was an issue of pragmatism, realism, and just, I suppose, sex. So, which is as real as it gets. So they just said, fine, what's the problem? Let's get on with it. Forget all the moral high grounds, the ethics, the religiosity. They just said, don't worry, we'll make everything fit. And they did. And it's, what's amazing is that they actually pulled it off. Pulled what off? Pulled the stunt off. The stunt. They actually pulled it off. And I'm not trying to right now justify. I'm not trying to pass any judgment on it. I'm just observing what's happened. That the scholars of the past, they managed to pull it off. Like they just said, well, here comes, because if you think about it now, you would think, like, let's pause for a moment. Imagine we go back to that ontology of religion. The religion which, you know, thinks desires are bad, and with a capital R, and it thinks, you know, it looks down on sexual practices, and it thinks entertainment is bad, and it thinks like material, and it has an ascetic. That ontology of religion, the essence of religion to many people, if you go back to that, you would think that they would never be able to pull this off. You know, this issue of the slave girl, you think that with that mindset, like with music, for example, you could tell that they weren't clearly motivated enough to legitimize music. Like, I suppose some of them listened to it and others didn't. Music wasn't the way music is today, because music today is a huge thing for many people in their day-to-day lives. But in the past, it wasn't as big of a thing. I mean, it was good for people, but it wasn't what it is today. That's what I'm saying. So they weren't as motivated to legitimize music. Some of them did, like Ibn Hazm and a few other ulama legitimized music, said, look, it's not haram. But when it came to things like slave girls, they just all got in line and just organized themselves and just worked, and everybody just accepted it. Like, they just said, yeah, and they even gave it a religious veneer, that, oh, what we're doing, this is actually a good religious act. And it's amazing that they actually pulled it off. I gotta salute them, seriously. That is such a difficult task to pull off. If you think about it. Like, look, think about it. Today, most Muslim cultures accept polygamy. they accept that polygamy is Islamically valid. Most Muslim cultures accept that. They don't practice it though. Look how hard it would be to pull off polygamy. Even though most Muslim cultures accept that it's permissible, you know, Islam allows it, and yet most, even imams and all these people, can't pull it off. And when they do try to, look at Hasanat, he tried to pull it off with Abdullah and his other what was it, sister Sarah, what a disgust. I mean, how can you I don't know how people can call I don't know how you can call any woman sister that isn't your actual sister, but chalo, that's a different discussion. But calling your wife sister, that's a nutty game going on there. But so people can't pull off polygamy, and in the past they managed to pull off slave girls, and they did it not only confidently, but they said it's a religious act, and they do it loud and proud. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the power of religion. So, yeah. I mean, and the thing that they said about, so the question that was being, but I always think that one of the fascinating things about slave girls is that the discussion of modesty goes completely out the window. So all of a sudden, these scholars don't seem to care about, you know, that a woman must be covered up and she must be a ninja and she must be like this and only her eyes, and even her eyes are a fitna. You know, some Hanbali fatwa said just cover one eye. One eye is enough to see the world, God damn it. So you got some bichariya like trying to be religious and they're just looking at things like a pirate. But this is unfortunate to that extent. People went that, oh my God, you know, women, oh, you know, you can't look at women, you can't do this, oh my God, are you looking at my women? God, don't look at them. But yet, when it came to slave girls, everything went out the window. So there was no discussion of covering them up. In fact, they could technically walk around topless. I don't think they did walk around topless. I don't think they did. I think that's an exaggeration. Because men are men at the end of and the biggest BS is people say in the books, oh yeah, but it's okay, she's a slave girl, who would desire her? And you're thinking, and every guy reading the book is like, yeah, of course, duh, who would desire her? That's the biggest blag. Are you mad? Of course they would desire them. Why wouldn't they desire? Men are hardwired that way. They cannot think differently. Okay, it's impossible for men to think differently. So much, yeah, from millions of years evolution aa raha hai. Ab tumhara baap break lagayega kya? How are we going to get the break so suddenly? It's not going to... Think about it. It doesn't work like that. The male, especially on visual perception... Toba. This one too much, this one too much. So, you can see that definitely wasn't true. And they seem to say, yeah, I think generally they didn't walk around topless and things, but I think they didn't... they probably walked around in kind of working clothes gear. So, for example, their arms were uncovered, maybe the lower part of their legs were uncovered, like working attire. So if you're working, cleaning things, doing all that kind of stuff, and obviously with that, cleavage would have been showing. So they wouldn't have walked around with a kind of... Because you got to remember, in the past, they just had like a hole to stick your head in. Don't take that out of context, right? Out in the cloth, and they would have just obviously had a veil to put around here, like a dupatta kind of thing. So these women that were working wouldn't have been wearing dupatte and doing things like that, wearing headscarves and veils. So they would just be working. So that kind of stuff would be showing. Now, so hence the scholars said, yeah, it's fine. And for some reason, the absolute no-no was the navel to the knee. And you think, kneecaps? I don't know what kind of sick games those scholars will play. Why is the kneecap a no-no? So the scholars were like, yeah, you can see their breasts, but kneecaps, toba toba. You know, astaghfirullah. Ittaqillah ya akhi. Have some fear of God. Why would you see their kneecap for? It's like, what? Kneecap? Why would I? But the kneecap is apparently the part of the aura that they're not meant to be uncovering. And according to some, I know there's the ikhtilaf. But anyway, it's always a fruitful discussion, bringing in the ima and the slave girls. And it's something which I think today a lot of people are then stuck in trying to explain. Right, let's move on. Can you give me... oh, Imam Hassan is in the house. Ahlan wa sahlan, ahlan wa sahlan. People, Imam Hassan from Gloucester. Doing it. Philip Hesse is interested in the Almoravid Empire and their version of Islam, so I don't have to do the research myself. Acha, can you give me this information so I don't have to do the research myself? Of course, हम तो यूं ही फजूल बैठे हुए हैं. I've got nothing better to do. It's okay. You don't do any research. I'll do it. Of course. My time is useless. I've got a whole lecture on Al-Andalus from rise to fall. Watch it. It's on YouTube. It's in about 12 or 13 lectures. And it's in quite some considerable detail. So you should enjoy it, inshallah. Right. So what else is going on? Somebody had asked about gelatin. Gelatin, people. In my understanding, gelatin is permissible. It's not haram. Why? And I'll come to, just to explain, to shed some light on it. The question is that gelatin, when it's extracted, I mean, I know it's taken from different sources, whether it could be from pigs, it could be taken from bovine, I mean, you could be taken like from beef origins and cows, and there is plant gelatin as well. But the issue is that in order to extract and produce this kind of gel-like substance, the kind of synthetic process that is undertaken, the way the bones and the other elements are crushed, and then the additives, what's mixed to it, and how the whole transformative undertaking that happens, it changes its fundamental structure. So this, at the net result, which is gelatin, no longer is what it began with. And this in the Sharia is called istihala. So istihalatul mahiyya. So you change the essence or the essential properties of something, that it undergoes a partial chemical change. That product no longer carries the initial ruling. So if alcohol, alcohol according to many people is not only haram, but it's najas, it's impure according to many people. If it's transformed into vinegar, it becomes pure. So it's not just the issue of it not being an intoxicant, the substance is now pure. Why is it pure? Because it's undergone istihala, a substance transformation. Similarly, there's many masail, like Ibn Abidin in the Hanafi Madhab mentions in his Radd al-Muhtar, for example, and other madhabs mention this as well, that if a pig dropped into a salt mine, and the salt surrounding the body, the meat surrounding the pig, it dissolved the pig over time. Let's say it took, I don't know, whatever, a year and now, or several months, and now the body of the pig has completely disintegrated into the salt mine, that salt is permissible according to all madhabs, even though it's a pig disintegrated into it. So no madhab says that that is haram now. And they all accept that that is halal, because there's been a chemical change, there's been a structural change, a transformation of properties. So it's gone from this pig structure into that. Same thing with alcohol, into vinegar. Same thing with many. And they use the hadith. I mean, this is, I'm not saying this is, has to be, so forceful as evidence, but a lot of the madhabs use this. They use a hadith that the martyrs on the Day of Judgment, their blood will smell like musk. Now, that's in Sahih Bukhari, and Imam Bukhari brings that hadith to substantiate the point that when something undergoes a transformation, its value changes as well. Because in the dunya, many ulama, although I would disagree with them on this point, but many ulama consider blood to be impure. I don't agree with them on that, but there are many, I would say the majority of the ulama, who consider blood to be impure. Now, based on that, the martyrs rising and blood smelling like musk, and that being a praise for them, could only make sense if it was no longer impure. That's the evidence that they're drawing from this hadith. To me, that's not so much of a big hadith, but you can use hadith like the Prophet saying in Tirmidhi, ni'mu khallikum khallu khamrikum, that the best of your vinegar is the vinegar of your alcohol. So that's a hadith in Tirmidhi that the Prophet said that that was the best vinegar that they liked. That was from spirit vinegar and alcoholic vinegar. So you can see that once something undergoes a structural change, it no longer carries the same ruling. There is ikhtilaf on this issue, but that's the ruling that I go with. That's what many of the ulama have said in recent times. Many of the fatwa boards, many of the great scholars of Al-Azhar, and you're going to get many people, Qardawi, Bimbayya, and all the Mashayikh Al-Azhar and the Fatwa Forum of Europe, and all of these boards, modern day ulama, contemporary ulama, many of them will go with the fact that gelatin is not haram. The Salafiyah might consider it haram, and the Deobandis and people like that probably do consider it haram, but besides them, most of the enlightened world, the enlightened scholars of this day and age, they will all pretty much consider gelatin to be permissible. So I'm in line with that. Why the Ottomans and their sultans are never quoted in the masjids? Right, so that's a good question actually, because you see the Ottomans, first of all, by Ottomans, do you mean the Ottoman, the actual rulers, or the appointed scholars? I'm not sure what exactly you mean. But it is true that the Ottoman scholars are, some of them are at times referred to like, you're going to have like, what is it? You have a few, Mustafa Sabri and a few other mullahs, and that are from the time of the Ottomans, and arguably even Zahid al-Kawthari is from the time of the Ottomans in recent Hanafi Fiqh, and you're going to have quite a few that are from that time, but they're hardly ever quoted, especially in fiqh. And the reason being is I think they weren't as strict as maybe the later Hanafis would like the Hanafis to be. So to the Hanafi madhab is one of the most control freak madhabs that you can find. It is a madhab on, it's like if it had a personality, it would be somebody with OCD and extreme paranoia, a kind of schizophrenia going on with the Hanafis. So if you were to give it a kind of personality, that's the kind of personality you would give it. Especially the Indo-Pak version. of the Hanafiya today, which does hugely represent the Hanafis in the world. They seem to seal the deal with Ibn Abidin. So, and his Radd al-Muhtar, which they refer to as Fatawa Shami, who's from almost about just under 200 years ago. Now he writes this. They claim he's the seal. He seals everything. There's nobody. Khatimatul Muhaqqiqeen, and he's the last of. He's everything. So it's difficult finding maneuverability in the Hanafi madhab. Obviously, Imam Abu Hanifa himself was a legend, but the Hanafi madhab today, in all honesty, is a nightmare. It's everybody in it's trapped. The scholars are trapped. the public is trapped. Everybody's. It's just thinking. There's no. And then they've been brought up for so long on it, and it's been so reinforced that it's difficult thinking from a different perspective. This is why the Malikis are... People, don't get me wrong, don't get it twisted, folks, that people did try to sabotage the Maliki madhab as well. They tried. But it wasn't as successful. So there was always a kind of free spirit still floating within the Maliki madhab, within the school of Medina. People like from the last century, you're going to still get all these amazing Maliki legends. Hussein Khidar, Shaykh al-Azhar, Ibn Ashur, Shaykh al-Islam in Tunis, Aziz Ju'ayyid. You're going to get Shaykh Allah al-Fasi in Morocco, Yahya al-Wulati in Mauritania. All these kind of free spirits. Great, legendary, epic free spirits. So the madhab was, and this is in recent times, it was difficult to kind of lock it down, to control everybody, because the clergy love doing that. They love controlling people. Right, so somebody said, don't confuse the extreme cultural practices of the Desis with the rulings of the Hanafi madhab. Adil Aziz is saying that. That's true. We should not confuse culture with religion. That said, if I am to be honest, and if we're to be objective, the Deobandi, the Desi practice of Islam, according to the Hanafi madhab, is a near to true picture of what Ibn Abidin is presenting in his Radd al-Muhtar. So if you read Radd al-Muhtar, it is what the Desi culture is very similar. It's not maybe identical. There's obviously a splash of culture, but it's very similar. It's not like, let's say, modern day Turkish Hanafis and Radd al-Muhtar. They would be worlds apart. But the Radd al-Muhtar, Ibn Abidin, and Desi Hanafis, same to same. That's a proper Paki. Same to same. This one same to same. Right, so what's the question, people? What is the question? What is going on? We can't speak about Hanafis without wudu. Hanafi madhab. No, don't get me wrong. I love Imam Abu Hanifa. Imam Abu Hanifa is epic. It's one of my absolute favorite mujtahids. It's a shame that his madhab completely, not in person, but in principle, betrayed him. His madhab is like the Judas. If Imam Abu Hanifa is Jesus as a similitude, then the madhab is Judas. And this is and you can imagine the Last Supper is Ibn Abidin. Hanafis are going to love me after this. Can the aura change over time? The aura is what you ought to cover. I suppose perspectives on it can. Perspectives. perspectives. People, can you just give me 20 seconds? I've just got to... hang on, people. Hang on. Oh, I'm back. Oh, I dived back into action, people. I apologize wholeheartedly. Just had to do a detour there. Oh my god. Anyway, I'm back. Right, people, so let's take some questions. What else is going on? What's bothering the people? Mi gente? What's going on? Let me take some questions that have been posted here. Come on, peoples. Where does it say? Right, okay, I'd been asked this question about in Surah Baqarah. Right, apologies, Junaid, apologies. He said that was more than 20 seconds. Lo siento. Right, so it says there's a verse in Surah Baqarah which talks about slaughtering a cow. That is true. فَضْرِبُوهُ, then to strike the dead man with some of it. Okay. Was this a miracle? What is the connection between the cow and the man being revived? Now, Surah Al-Baqarah, those of you that don't know, means it's the surah named after the cow. Now, I know that sounds strange, but that's basically surahs in the Quran was simply, they weren't revealed. You have to remember how the Quran was revealed. It wasn't revealed in a way that, okay, today this is the chapter, and this chapter is titled this, and this is... It was revealed as a message. Now, people remembered it through a particular story that was a point that was poignant, okay, that kind of stood out, that was salient. And so in Surah Al-Baqarah, which is the longest surah of the Quran, the story of the Baqarah, of the cow, is a kind of a salient aspect. Therefore, the whole surah kind of has taken that name, just to remind people, oh, that's the surah we're talking about. I don't believe that the names of the surah were tawqifiyah, as in, I mean, there's ikhtilaf in this issue. Some scholars believe the names of the surah were divine, and other scholars feel the names of the surah were kind of ijtihadi, as in, maybe the Prophet referred to it as that, so people understood which surah it was. I'm more inclined to that understanding, that the surahs, the names of the surah were not divine. They were just as a point of reference. That's what they were. So Surah Al-Baqarah, there's many things going on, but there's a brief story about Bani Israel and this incident where they're told to go find a cow, and they have to sacrifice this cow. Now, it does mention about doing something about striking the meat. Now, it mentioned that it's a very famous story about they then say, oh, ya Musa da'u lana rabbaka yubayyin lana ma hi, that, oh, ya Musa, pray to your Lord so he explains to us what kind of a cow. They kept asking questions, so every time they'd ask a question, it would get more complicated for them. So they would say, how old should the cow be? What should it be? Ma lawnuha, what's the color of it? And then every time they would say this, then God would stipulate something. So it would become more and more restrictive. So eventually they find this kind of cow and they sacrifice it. and they strike the meat. Now, there's an assumption. It doesn't say anywhere in the Quran, does not say in Surah Al-Baqarah. So you can, so you'll have, let's see if I can just bring it up. So you'll have here, look. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وإذ قال موسى لقومه إن الله يأمركم أن تذبحوا بقرة, that when Moses said to his people that God commands you to sacrifice a cow, قالوا أتتخذنا هزوا, they said, do you take us to be a joke? قال أعوذ بالله أن أكون من الجاهلين, he said, I seek refuge from acting as one who is ignorant. قالوا ادع لنا ربك يبين لنا ما هي, that, you know, then pray to your Lord, or ask him, explain to us what kind of a cow. قال إنه يقول إنها بقرة لا فارض ولا بكر عوان بين ذلك فافعلوا ما تؤمرون, that he says that it is a cow that is not so old, it is not totally young like an absolute calf, it is something in between that, and just do as you are commanded to do. قالوا ادع لنا ربك يبين لنا ما لونها, they said, ask your Lord what color, ما لونها. قال إنه يقول إنها بقرة صفراء فاقع لونها تسر الناظرين, he said that it's a bright kind of yellow that is pleasing, because some yellows they can be repelling, like they demonstrate a sense of poisonousness, a venomous nature, but this is تسر الناظرين, it's a kind of yellow that pleases. قالوا ادع لنا ربك يبين لنا ما هي, they said, oh, but you know, we need more clarity. إن البقرة تشابه علينا, they said, there's so many cows we don't يا بني إسرائيل they go, there's so many cows we don't know which one. وإنا إن شاء الله لمهتدون, they said, wallahi, we're almost there. You know? So قال إنه يقول إنها بقرة لا ذلول تثير الأرض ولا تسقي الحرث مسلمة لا شية فيها, he said that the next, that it's not one that has been driven so hard by work and it does not kind of plow the fields, and it's not one, there's no blemishes in it and things like this, that it's kind of just, so basically it's not one that's been driven to the ground, it's not worked on the field, it's not, and more rules are being added. قالوا الآن جئت بالحق. You gotta rate Bani Israel, huh? They go, right, now you're onto something, they said to Moses. فذبحوها وما كادوا يفعلون, and then they sacrificed it, but they barely managed to sacrifice it. وإذ قتلتم نفسا فادارأتم فيها والله مخرج ما كنتم تكتمون. You know, this is now the verse, because up until this point Allah has not mentioned anything about them killing somebody and why they was finding this cow. But Muslim scholars have connected the two. Now Allah doesn't say that these two incidents are by necessity connected. Now here Allah says, you see, beginning this verse by saying, وَإِذْ, and remember when, قَتَلْتُمْ نَفْسًا فَدَارَأْتُمْ فِيهَا, remember when you killed, that there was a body you killed somebody, and then you got into a dispute over it. وَاللَّهُ مُخْرِجٌ مَا كُنْتُمْ تَكْتُمُونَ, and yet Allah was to expose that which you were planning on concealing. فَقُلْنَا ضَرِبُوهُ بِبَعْضِهَا. Now from here, people say that they make that connection with the verse of the cow. Because here Allah says, and we said, strike it with some of it, and a feminine pronoun is used, it. So here the understanding is it is referring to the cow. Although Allah hasn't said that, but that's fine, we can go with that. But Allah says, and He said, strike it with it, strike him or the person, the corpse, with it. كذلك يحيي الله الموتى ويريكم آياته لعلكم تعقلون. And that is how Allah brings things to life and brings the dead to life, and He shows you His signs, and in the hope that you may be people of intellect. ثُمَّ قَسَتْ قُلُوبُكُم مِّن بَعْدِ ذَلِكَ. And then Allah goes on to say, and then your hearts hardened after that. Now this, you see, this verse doesn't state anywhere that the dead body came back to life. But what happens, what happens is that there was an assumption. Muslims assumed that, oh, Allah is saying, oh, this is how Allah gives life. So also maybe he's saying that because the dead body was brought back to life. And then people all of a sudden came out with these fanciful stories. They began to say, oh, do you know what happened? They struck the dead man with a piece of meat. The dead man sat up and he pointed to his murderer. And this was a miracle. Now, miracle stories always work wonders with people, as you can imagine. People love miracle stories. So this story then took off and became popular. Otherwise, it is not mentioned in the Quran like that. It's not mentioned in any authentic hadith like that. And if you see in the tafsir, there is the tafsir of Rashid Rida, where he's quoting his sheikh as well, Muhammad Abdul, when he's explaining this verse of the Quran. He mentions that if you look at the Jewish Bible and the Jewish laws, that they did this as a ritual. Now you may say, well, that doesn't make much sense. That why would you get a cow or why would you get some meat and tap the meat on a dead body? But it's actually part of the Jewish scriptures. And he actually brings the Jewish scriptures, and you can Google them. So there was a ritual that the Jews used to do. Now that ritual is simply quoted. Now the Jews do have many rituals. In fact, the Jewish practice is so, I mean, I would probably feel obsessed with rituals. That they have so many like meaningless rituals, because rituals by their definition are meaningless. That they don't have a kind of rationale to them, they're just rituals. So this was not a miracle, it was simply a ritual. Okay, so I hope that answers the question. There was nothing about the person being brought back to life, it was not a miracle. Okay, but the story about them going to find the cow was quoted. Why was that quoted? Because it was to show that how human beings at times have complicated for themselves a simple affair. That something in essence was quite simple, but you tied so many knots on it that the whole thing became complicated. But it was by your own doing that you did that. So that was the message in those early ayat that we just went through. هل أصبح العلم عبارة عن المزاح هنا ذهبت البركة سبحان الله. Allah, Allah, ذهبت. It's gone, it's gone. I have not claimed to be sitting here with barakah. But there's an understanding that, look, people have this understanding that joking or laughing is a bad thing. That ينافي العلم. That, you know, that this kind of having a jovial attitude cannot be associated with being serious. And therefore, it's almost assumed that it's an inability to be intelligent or to be of knowledge, because knowledge necessitates this kind of, this somber, serious kind of. Why? ¿Por qué? Are we about to kill someone? Why the somber attitude? Who said that knowledge can only be conveyed like that? It's a good point. Who said it? You know, people say, yeah, but it doesn't befit knowledge. Said who? Says who? Who said that? I mean, you know, it's that thing, isn't it? That, oh, because you said it, I must accept it. You know, why? I get the fact that many ulama wrote in their books that this is how knowledge must be always transmitted with. And don't get me wrong, when you're dealing with complex issues, obviously you're concentrating and you're serious and you're and that makes sense, that you're not cracking jokes because you're trying to get to the bottom of something, you're trying to unravel, unpack an issue, and it's intense. So I get that. But when you're conveying something, why must you always be very somber spirited? Why? And I'll tell you why. I know why I feel that one of the reasons the clergy loved that is because I think when everything is serious, it creates an atmosphere where people can't question what you're saying. Because if everything is very somber and almost daunting, it creates like an awe-striking atmosphere, like everything is tense. And I say, it's that kind of very preacher, and the ruling is this. It makes like the audience can't question what's being taught. So the teaching becomes confessional. It becomes dogmatic. And whereas if we're joking and laughing and relaxed, it's easy to question my authority. And this is why the scholars didn't like this kind of spirit of being always being jovial, because they felt, and they write in the books that, it's going to make you lose authority. Because, you see, and that's all it really is. It's just authority. Otherwise, each to their own. You have your own personality, I have mine. Somebody, if they wish to, if they're very serious, then they can convey things in a serious manner, and likewise in a jovial manner. Otherwise, some of the greatest mujtahideen, like Sufyan al-Thawri, who's an epic mujtahid, a contemporary of Imam Malik and Imam Abu Hanifa, was known to not only crack jokes during his gathering, but he would fall over stamping his feet. So there you go. Right, what's a question? Right, let's take some that have been piling up on Facebook. People will say, why has he ignored the Facebook questions? Did somebody just say, did somebody just say empty talk? Empty talk. Ban that. Admin, block that. That loser. Right, Claire Jones, as we are equal. Absolutely, absolutely. And this is all it is often. It's just power politics. That's what it is. How comes a breakaway Shia sect was able to steal the black stone in the Kaaba and take control of the haram area when Allah previously destroyed approaching army of birds dropping pellets? Why didn't Allah send pellets on those that mutilated the black stone? Akbar has asked a very interesting question. That's an amazing question. Ifzal has said Mufti is a legend. Wah, Ifzal ji, Meri Jaan. Right, may Allah bless you. Ameen, ameen. Right, so this is a very interesting question, people. I want you to pay attention to this. Surah Al-Fil. Alam tara kayfa fa'ala rabbuka bi ashab al-fil. Do you not see how your Lord did with the people of the elephant? Which was Abraha, the Abyssinian who'd come over. Now, this thing, why is it that happened there and it didn't happen with the Qaramita? So the Qaramita were a sect, a subsect within the Shia. So you have the Shia, and then within them you've got a subsect of the, I believe non-existent today, but the Qaramita of the Shia. Now there was a time when they attacked, Mecca and nicked, they stole the black stone. There goes the black stone. It's going off. And they ran away with it. And they kept it for over 2 decades. Billy is in the house. Alright. Doing it, Billy. Doing it. So, the Qaramita kept the black stone for over 2 decades, and eventually some of the Muslims did manage to capture it, but it was broken and smashed, and then they just brought back retrieved pieces of this black stone. Even today, the black stone is just small pieces. It's not actually the actual black stone. So the black thing that you have is not actually the black stone. If you look into it, you're going to see small kind of just pieces of shiny black stone against a greater black setting. The black setting is not the black stone, it's only those pieces in there. So, and you can Google it. Right, now that is, so first of all, about the Qaramita stealing the black stone, that is a fact, that they did steal the black stone, and they kept it for a few decades. A quick point on what is the black stone. The black stone, people, is nothing sacred, okay? We need to understand that, okay? I think it's important. There is no true sanctity to the black stone. The only thing was that the black stone happened to be in the Kaaba, and the Kaaba happened to be the place which is the Qibla for the Muslims, which has then been made as the Qibla for Muslims and is attributed to Ibrahim alayhi salam. So what we do know is that these practices, these rituals were affirmed, as in acknowledged by Islam, and therefore kept alive and validated. There is no, this black stone thing, most likely, okay, so brace yourselves, people, brace yourselves. This is no need to get scared, by the way, when I say this. Right, this is when you say brace, brace. There's going to be some turbulence, some turbulence. So the black stone most likely was part of a pagan god. But it most likely was associated, by association, part of a pagan god culture in pre-Islamic times. So we know that in Petra, the main god, which some argue is Hubal, or what they called, they also refer to him as Dhushara or Dushera. Now, and some have argued he's the same as Baal Shamin, but the point is that the main god that they had was a big black stone. Okay. Now, this black stone that they had as the main god, to represent the main god, was then also replicated later on because remember, Petra is probably where all Arabs kind of centuries before, because this is hundreds of years before Islam. So we're maybe talking, I don't know, maybe 600 years before Islam at this point. These are the people that really set up, that kind of form that legacy that other Arabs then start to copy. Okay, they are like, they are Arabesque. They're not from, they claim their lineage to be from one of the children of Ismail, but not the one the Arabs come through. So they are like, they used to speak Aramaic, but they used to write in their script is today the Arabic script. That's where they kind of get it from. The Arabs got it from. So Petra, we know that they were like the kind of capital that other Arabs later took from. Now, we know that in the centuries that followed, Petra obviously lost its importance. It was not, in the time of the Prophet, Petra was not an important place at all. But other places were, like Hira, which had taken a lot from Petra, and were the offspring of the Arabs that later ruled Petra, the Tanukhiyin, and then you have the Lakhmiyin. But I don't want to get distracted here. But the point is, many places took a black stone figure as a god. Many of them. Including Ta'if, close to Mecca, had a big cube, a black cube, which they addressed as the god Layth. And they would put a cloth over Layth, and it was also a cube kind of object. In some ways a bit similar to, I suppose, presumably maybe the Kaaba, but probably a bit smaller. Now, this kind of figure, and there were probably about 20 different Kaabas that emerged. So the Kaaba in Mecca was not the only Kaaba, okay? But the Kaaba in Mecca is, by our understanding, we claim it, that legacy belonged to Ibrahim alayhi salam. The other Ka'bat, they were just dedicated to their gods. They weren't dedicated. So the one in Ta'if was dedicated to Layth, and these other ones were dedicated to other gods. They weren't dedicated just to like Allah in that sense. Okay. Whereas the Kaaba is dedicated to Allah, the one in Mecca that we have today. So the black stone, most likely that many of these places had a black stone, which was usually one of their gods. So it's very likely that the black stone was probably a remnant of that over time lost its importance. So like what happened is maybe the Quraysh incorporated it into the corpus of the Kaaba, the body of the Kaaba, and then over time it was just seen as a holy special stone, and it lost that importance as the god. Just as Safa and Marwa were two gods. They were, they weren't, it was Isaf and Naila. They were two lovers that came and apparently, committed two gods that had sex in front of the Kaaba, and they weren't meant to, and therefore they were turned to stone. And therefore people did the running between them as a form of a kind of expression of their love, I guess. And also a remembrance that you're not meant to do certain things in front of the Kaaba. But over time, that meaning kind of got lost. And then people just stuck with the general ritual. And so what happens is that this is why many of the Ansar from Medina, when they came to Mecca, they refused to do the Safa and Marwa. So Qurtubi and all these people bring it because they said that this was a practice that Quraysh invented and the Arabs invented from Jahiliyyah. It was to do with Naila and Isaf, the goddesses, the god and the goddess. It's nothing to do with Islam. So, and Ibrahim alayhi salam. And so they refused, and this was many of the Sahaba, they said that we won't do the Safa Marwa thing. This is not, this is from pagan practices. But then there's the verse in the Quran saying that, look, but that meaning has gone now. And this is why when I say to people about things like Halloween and Christmas, and people get off, they flare up. Like, oh my God, Halloween. But its original practice hundreds of years ago was to do with witches. And you say, well, but then Safa Marwa most likely was to do with gods and goddesses, pagan gods. It wasn't like... The point is that this... You see, it had lost its practice. And then, hence this verse of the Quran, that Inna Safa wal Marwata min sha'airillah, that now it is deemed a remembrance of Allah. فَمَنْ تَطَوَّعَ بِهِمَا. So who today understands them to be symbolic of a worship to God? فَمَنْ تَطَوَّعَ. This is not from, the term taw'iyan. This is not from taw'. That don't understand this to mean voluntary. It's because Safa wal Marwa is not voluntary in neither Umrah nor Hajj. So it's لَيْسَ مَنْ تَطَوَّعَ بِهِمَا كَمَنْ تَنَفَّلَ بِهِمَا. لا يعني من تنفل بهما. يعني من حسبهما طاعة لله. That whosoever considers them to be a worship for Allah, فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ شَاكِرٌ عَلِيمٌ. Then indeed Allah is grateful for them, towards them for their worship. Because, so in a similar way, the black stone was most likely was part of a pagan god practice, but in the generation, maybe just before the Prophet and so on, it had lost that importance, but it was still kept as a holy thing. They don't know why it was obviously the pagans probably knew why it was holy, but they generally was just seen revered. So Muslims kept that practice that, we'll just leave it there in the Kaaba, and they'll use it as a point. So the Prophet would do the Raf al-Yadayn, begin, so when you're doing the tawaf, it's a point to symbolize something. That's all. It has nothing holy or special. It is not a stone from God. It may have been a meteorite. Most of the black stones, by the way, that the Arabs used to use for their gods were black because they were volcanic kind of remnants. That's why. So the black stone may also be a volcanic remnant, or it may be a meteorite. I think it's definitely one of those two. The Saudis, unfortunately, won't let people conduct any tests on it. It's a shame, but I wish they did, so we could know what it was. So the fact that the Qaramita took it away and broke it and whatever, in all honesty, is no big deal. I mean, it's not a nice thing. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's a nice thing, but it's not something like, oh my God. In fact, Sayyidina Umar said that, I know that you're just a hajar, you're just a stone. لا تنفع ولا تضر. You know, you cannot cause me any harm. You cannot cause me any benefit. This was the statement of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu an. And he said that, yes, but I saw the Prophet out of kind of like, I saw him kiss you, so I'm just going to do that. Now remember, the Prophet never taught them that the black stone was holy, but out of the Prophet's general upbringing and the Prophet's general practice, that since the stone just now symbolized, the house, the Kaaba symbolized Baytullah, and this was a part of it, that practice, the Prophet kissed it. Just as a ritual. It was not something done as this is a holy stone. It was not a holy, and it is not a holy stone. It is just a stone. There is nothing special about it apart from that it's got this history associated with it. Muslims today are obviously crazy over it. They beat the hell out of each other to get to the black stone. Which at some point, I guess, in time was perhaps a pagan god. No, I'm joking. But it's amazing, huh? That people, they beat themselves and they do all this to get to it. But there's no harm in these things, because today, what does it symbolize? It symbolizes a ritual to God. And we as Muslims, we submit with that ritual, and that's fine. That's what it is. That's all it is, a submission. It's not really, you gotta be, this is where these other stories all fall apart. Oh no, that this is what it was, and there was when you go from the Kaaba up, there's going to be the other Kaaba, there's going to be this heaven right above it, there's going to be all these old stories. None of these things are real. I mean, and the problem with all this kind of belief is when you look into the evidence, it's going to all fall apart. And then if you believe so firmly in these little folk tales, your iman might collapse. It might not. I mean, because once you realize, well, actually, this is just all stories. So this is why I feel it's better to go with the truth. Seek the truth, people, and the truth shall set you free. Allah. So, that I hope that answers. Somebody said the story about Hajar alayhi salam and Ismail going between the seven times between Safa and Marwa. In all honesty, I think that's made up. It's very difficult. Come on, we have to be reasonable here. That what it seems is that later on, when Islam spread to the other Arab kingdoms in the Middle East, some of the Muslims, in order to show the Arabs that we are one and to have a familial bond with them, they overemphasize the link of Abraham alayhi salam, because all Arabs claim descent from Abraham. So obviously, if I'm approaching, let's say I'm approaching an Indian non-Muslim. Let's say I'm approaching an Indian non-Muslim now, and I want to speak about a message, but I want to build a good bond with them. So I suppose I may speak in Urdu or Hindi. Same thing. I mean, because you're showing some similarity. You're showing that we're not that different. We've got similar roots. We've got similar. So it's at that time that when Islam spread into what was the Ghassani kingdom, the Christian kingdom of the Arabs, in parts of Sham today, which would have been Damascus, Jordan, Lebanon, the Levant, Palestine. All this was pretty much under the Ghassani kingdom, and on the east side was the Lakhmi kingdom, Hira and all these other places. Now, when the Arabs went there, they obviously stressed that, look, we are one, that you guys believe in Jesus, we're also Arabs, our link is Abraham. And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he came with this message, and that made the message more palatable to the Arabs at the time, who accepted it. And I think that's when they invented the story of Hajar alayhi salam running for Safa and Marwa, so they could add an Abrahamic link to it. Otherwise, it makes no sense, because yes, it is true that Ismail alayhi salam would have been there. But this thing that, okay, she couldn't find water and she struggled, that sounds reasonable, that she may have struggled because she couldn't find water. But this thing that she ran 7 times looking for water, and what are we doing? We're celebrating that? Is that what we're doing? We're celebrating the struggle of... And how does that link into a remembrance of God? Like, what does that have to do with God? Like, if she ran 7 times, and who said she ran 7 times? And where do you get... Like, how do we know she ran 7 times? Nobody was there. So this point of saying that, oh, well, really what we're commemorating here is a mother's despairing spirits when she couldn't find water and thought her son was going to die. So she ran 7 times, and God really liked that running. That's making God look so evil. That God liked that running so much that he said everybody run like that. Can you imagine that? That we're saying that God said, he said like, yaar, I like this. Chalo sab lag jao. Everybody run up and down. Oh God. This is, you see that that doesn't make any sense. So why would God do that? I mean, I get the fact that she would have struggled, but the fact that somebody said it was precisely 7, and then now God loved that so much that he said, everybody run till eternity up and down Safa and Marwa, doesn't make any sense. I mean, this most likely, clearly, it seems like this part was made up. It was, this part was... Abrahamicized, if you like. So it was Abrahamicized by the Muslim Arabs that wanted to connect with the other Arabs, and they wanted to show them, why is our Mecca, Kaaba, important? Because to the Christians, why do we care about your Mecca? Oh, because it's of Abraham. And it created that link. Okay, so that's most likely what happened. Cool, people. Right, the Zamzam thing, no, I'm not saying Zamzam might not have, the Ismail alayhi salam, and most likely Zamzam story, I believe most likely is true. I do believe that I believe that's true, Allahu A'lam, but I believe it's true. But the Zamzam story doesn't have to be connected to running 7 times up and down Safa and Marwa. It's just that you've been told that. So remember that it's not like the Zamzam isn't even on Safa and Marwa. So it doesn't even... So this... Because the whole point is, what they're trying to say is these were 2 hills, yeah? 2 hillocks or whatever. And you've got... Ismail alayhi salam is there crying. And so Safa... so Hajar is running up this mountain looking, can't see anyone. Now she's running down up that mountain looking, can't see anyone. Now she's running down up this mountain looking, can't see anyone. And she does this 7 times. But by then Zamzam begins. That's the story. That part, the running and all this, I'm not convinced with. And neither were many Sahaba. Many Sahaba rejected it from Medina. They said this was nothing to do with Abraham. This was made up by the kuffar of Quraysh. And why should we follow it? And even Allah, when speaking in the Quran about Safa wal Marwa, doesn't say it's because of Hajar. He doesn't say, oh yeah, inna Safa wal Marwa min sha'airi Hajar indama, whatever, sa'at ma baynahuma and this and that. Allah doesn't say that. He just says, yes, people use this to remember God today. So whosoever does this as a ritual act of worship, then Allah is grateful. That's all Allah says. The rest, what I'm trying to say is that story seems to be manufactured. The Zamzam thing, most likely, I believe, did happen. That this spring, and that is also mentioned in the Bible as well. About this spring close to Ishmael. So these things already had a precedent and they had a history, but the running thing just doesn't add up. That's now a mandatory part of Umrah and Hajj just because Hajar was distressed and she was running up and down, that God got so happy with the way she's running. And he said, I'm going to make everyone run like that. That just sounds so sadistic. That just sounds so absurd. What kind of... that's just like you can imagine the angels going... right, what's going... So, that doesn't sound like, that's not how rituals would be done. So, okay, I hope that sheds some light and makes sense, people. Right, let's take a look at the verse, because I've got to speak about Zaira Wasim as well. Somebody said, I'm just being real, ain't I? I'm not trying to, because the problem is people are so sensitive as well. People are like, oh, very touchy, touchy. And you must remember at all times, Allah addresses the issue of Safa wal Marwa in the Quran. And He does not make any association with Abraham. So there's a big question that it's very unlikely it had anything to do with Ibrahim alayhi salam. Just as Arafah, I'm not sure, I'm still researching into the history of Arafah, where Arafah comes into it. Because I don't think that was linked to Ibrahim alayhi salam either. But anyway, that's for a different day. We'll unpack that on a different day. As the poet says, Kal mila waqt to sulja denge teri zulfon ko. That tomorrow, if I get time, I'll untangle your hair. Kal mila waqt to sulja denge teri zulfon ko. Aaj zara ulje hain waqt ko suljane mein. That today I'm a bit distracted in untangling time itself. So tomorrow when I have time, I'll look at that amazing hair and untangle it. Today I'm a bit busy. That's what the poet says. Right, so let's take a look at... Right, so there's this hadith. I want to go over this hadith. Somebody said, what if the Kaaba Blackstone special and his followers, the Prophet was chosen to bring back the real rituals of the Kaaba, Safa and Marwa, and Blackstone? Is that possible? No, because it's not possible, because you have to remember when Ibrahim alayhi salam goes to Mecca, there's nobody there. It's nothing. It's just a valley with nothing. So it's not that, oh, they're already there. But yes, there is this understanding that he builds a place for remembrance. إِذْ يَرْفَعُ إِبْرَاهِيمُ الْقَوَاعِدَ مِنَ الْبَيْتِ وَإِسْمَعِيلُ, that him and Ismail build a house for remembrance. Now, that we believe is the Kaaba. Okay, now, the Safa and Marwa isn't mentioned about him, but it is mentioned in the Quran. So this is my point. When Allah mentions it, Allah would have just said that. Because why is Allah mentioned? Because the companions rejected it. Some of the companions from Medina said, we're not going to practice Safa al Marwa. It's from pagan practices. So Allah reveals verses telling you. So you don't need to guess. You can just read the verses. Allah says Safa and Marwa today are symbols for remembering God. So whosoever considers them to be an act of worship, Allah is grateful. There you go. Case closed. Allah could have said, oh, this was from the time of Abraham. He built it and he did this and he did that, but he didn't. So there's no point guessing. That's my point. Right. Right, okay, so there's this hadith, people. There's a hadith that I'd like to discuss, and this is used by many people to say we cannot use reason. And they transmit a saying of Sayyidina Ali radiallahu an, where he states that that if this deen was by reason, لو كان الدين بالعقل لمسحنا أسفل الخفين, that we would have wiped the lower part of the khuf, of the sock, but we wiped the upper part. So using this hadith, and I say hadith loosely because it's really a statement of the Sahabi, but of Ali radiallahu anh, but they're saying that Ali learnt it from the Prophet, therefore it carries that standard. Right, okay, just unpacking this. This hadith is, or this tradition is unacceptable. It is utterly weak. Da'if, people, it is da'if. We cannot accept this hadith or athar. First of all, let's begin with the fact that according to the school of Medina, which is voiced by Imam Malik, we do actually wipe the lower part of the sock. Just to start off with. So, pehla point. Right. Second point, let's take a look at the hadith. People say, ye Mufti Abu Layth kya janta hai? What does Mufti Abu Layth know? Huh? In the words of Sagar Siddiqui, the legend poet, who was always a drunk. He was always drunk. People say, look at this drunk. Look at this. What does he know about God? That's what they would say. So Sagar says in one of his poems, he says, "Aao ek sajda kare aalame madhoshi mein." That come, let us prostrate in this state of intoxication. Aao ek sajda kare aalame madhoshi mein. Log kehte hain Sagar ko khuda yaad nahi. Allah! He said people claim that Sagar doesn't seem to remember God. So, whilst in a state of intoxication, let's fall into sujood. See, coming back to the point. So this thing of this hadith by Sayyidina Ali, radiallahu an, this hadith, people, is found in approximately 12 different narrations, okay? The majority of these narrations, there's 3 in Abu Dawud, okay? There's 1 in Sunan al-Darmi, and there are 8 in the Musnad of Ahmad, okay? So the same narration, same Sayyidina Ali, same kind of thing. One from the Musnad of Ahmad is so brief that it doesn't give much detail. It just says Sayyidina Ali did wudu and wiped. It doesn't mention what. So you can remove that one. One in Abu Dawud says exactly the same. So brief, you can remove that one. That leaves 2 in Abu Dawud. We're going to take a look at one which is confusing. Okay, it begins by stating that Sayyidina Ali began to wipe over the feet. So it begins by using the word feet and ends with the word sock, khuffayn. Bit confusing, confusion. But we'll hold on to that one. The 7 narrations in Musnad of Ahmad, none of them mention wiping over the sock. They actually mention wiping over the feet, which is what the Shia do, or they believe you can do. It's permissible according to the Shia teachings, because Sayyidina Ali used to do it. Now, none of them mention the sock, the khuffayn. They mention wiping over the qadamain, over the feet. The one narration in Darmi, not only does it mention that wiping over the feet, Abu Muhammad al-Darmi, the scholar of Hadith, after it states this teaching was then abrogated. It was mansukh by the verse of the Quran that about wash your feet. So you can see that there's 8 narrations we've got now. 8. There's 5 narrations we've got. The intoxication's playing in now. Right, so we've got 8 narrations, 7 in the Musnad of Ahmad, 1 in Sunan al-Darmi, all mentioning that you wipe over the feet, not the sock. we're only left with one clear narration in Abu Dawood, just one, where Sayyidina Ali mentions this, that, oh, if the deen was with the aql, then we wouldn't be wiping over the we'd be wiping over the bottom of the sock, but we wipe over the top. And he doesn't mention foot here, he mentions sock. Okay, so we've got one narration. Now, first of all, we know that that wasn't the practice, because in Medina, the practice was that people actually wiped under the sock as well. That's the school of Medina. The other thing is, this hadith is transmitted from Ali. It goes from him, you've got Abdul Khair ibn Yazid, and from him, this hadith, all of these narrations, by the way, they're all the same. They come through the same, it's the same event. From Ali, from Abdul Khair, going through, either they rest on Abu Ishaq al-Sabi'i or Al-A'mash. Abu Ishaq al-Sabi'i or Al-A'mash. These two people, these two are those scholars of hadith that destroyed hadith for Ahlul Kufa. It has been transmitted that they are mudallisin, they are people of tadlis, and every single riwayah here does not mention that they heard it. Tadlis means when you can blag at times and you pretend you heard when you didn't hear. So none of them mention they heard it. It's all an'ana. Abu Ishaq al-Sabi'i, they say his memory messed up. He had dementia, he would mix things up at an older age. A'mash was known to have blagged so many different hadith. He was put in one of the worst kind of mudallisin you have. And it's the famous saying is Ma afsada hadith Ahl al-Kufa. The hadith of Ahl al-Kufa was not destroyed and corrupted except by two, Abu Ishaq al-Sabi'i and slightly junior to him, A'mash. And that is who this hadith, this whole thing rests on. These are the pillars of this hadith. So this hadith is clearly inadmissible. Da'if, people, da'if. So there you go. That's not, so this, anybody who says if the deen was by aql then we'd do this, say first of all, bring a sahih hadith, not this da'if, right? So there you go, right? So I hope that answers that. Right, now I'd like to take a look, right, so I'd like to take a look at this issue. Right, this discussion of Zaira Wasim. Right, Zaira Wasim, people. And why is this important? Zaira Wasim is a award-winning Bollywood actress, young, I think just 18. Starred in major movies like Dangal, I think Secret Superstar, and I don't know if she starred in any others. But she released a statement, a lengthy statement, that was shared all across social media, where she announces her separation from the Bollywood industry and highlights the reasons for doing so, which is what made this a potential controversy, let's say. She states that it was too damaging to her iman, and she uses the term iman, and her relationship with Allah to remain within Bollywood. She says she did try, but she found herself in such a long struggle and such a consistent battle of the nafs, of muharramat, of prohibited haram acts, and and eventually, and she found, despite having been met with fame, popularity, and a role model status for young people. She's ethnically from Kashmir, Indian Kashmir. So you can imagine Kashmir, which unfortunately, may Allah grant ease to its, the civilians there. They are unfortunately, majority of them are oppressed. Most of them suffer from depression because of the ruthless brutality of the occupying forces. So you can imagine that the people there, the difficulties they're going through in Kashmir. They're an amazing, I think still an amazing people. So, and then amongst them women who are further suffering. So, I mean, men everybody's suffering, and women are suffering even more. The victims of, on many occasions, rape and things like this, and just other kind of targeting and subjugation within society. So to many women worldwide, young women especially, teenagers especially, and especially Kashmiris, she was a role model. So she dissociates herself from Bollywood, and one of the key factors she highlights is that there was an absolute loss of barakah in her life. Now this has become hot news. Everybody's in that part of the world is then discussing it. What are my thoughts on it? And she's got like 6 kind of pages that she writes. So first of all, I would like to say that, look, any person is entitled to do whatever they like in life. Okay, it is their life, it is their choice. Good or bad, we all have to make our own choices in life. Okay, so that's just to clarify that I wouldn't be anybody to question anybody on their choices. I mean, I could give my perception, my evaluation, what I might do if I was in their position, or what I think they ought to, but their choice is theirs. That's a given. Okay, just to clarify that point. Another point I'd like to highlight is that I think it's very brave as well, coming out and stating religion as a factor, and stating these things is not easy. It's not easy for anybody to state things like, look, haram and a loss of barakah and things like this are the cause for why I'm dissociating myself from this field or industry. So I think that takes a lot of courage. So she's definitely somebody I applaud the courage element, because I think that's not an easy thing to do. I also would like to say, those of you that have read this statement, right, those of you that have read this statement of hers, I was actually quite shocked, in a pleasant way, how much she knew about Islam. Like, I don't mean I don't mean to be disparaging, but I was shocked how much Quran she was quoting, and how many Islamic terms she was using, and things like this. I wouldn't have assumed that somebody, I wouldn't have assumed she was learned in Islam, and therefore as let's say an actress in Bollywood, I wouldn't have assumed that her knowledge of Islam, or to quote things like that, would have been to that aptitude, but it was. So it's very impressive. I was impressed. Impressed ho gaya yaar. But that said, okay, put that aside. Right. Now, what do I feel about this? Do I think she did the right thing? Do I think my thoughts on this whole thing, and those of you that are also contemplating, I think that not just Zaira, anybody who is above the absolute struggle stage. So in life, if you take Maslow's hierarchy, you're struggling to make a living, you're struggling to survive. Many people in the world are just struggling to do that. Somebody asked, who are we talking about? We're talking about a Bollywood actress, a Kashmiri Muslim actress, who Zaira Wasim, who's departed from or dissociated herself from Bollywood, stating her reasons as religion, and that it wasn't viable to adhere to the religion truly and be within Bollywood. So now, coming back to my point, that I think anybody that rises above the absolute struggle survival mode within life, that these people that get an opportunity to think and reflect about life, they will unquestionably go through an existential angst, a kind of existential suffering almost. Suffering seems like a harsh word for me to use, but it is true. It is a kind of turmoil. Everybody's going through it. If you're not submerged in just simply trying to survive, if you're trying to just simply survive in the world, then your mind doesn't have the leisure, it doesn't have the opportunity to really dabble in these affairs. But the moment you do, you rise above that, you know, you've got something going, you could be in life or whatever it is, you start to contemplate about life. What am I doing? What is the purpose? Why do I feel a restlessness? I feel an unease going on. And we as humans, we have that within us. We have this kind of this turbulent aspect to ourselves, which sometimes manifests itself as a self-sabotaging element almost. But that's a different discussion. So people start to question, what am I doing in life? Why am I not feeling at ease? Why am I not feeling at peace with myself? So if you in your life happen to be in many, let's say, in certain atmospheres that are non-religious, like let's say you work in, like her, she works in an entertainment industry, or if you work in, I don't know, you could just be submerged in work, like you work in a club, or somebody works in, I don't know, they run a, even if it's not like so entertaining, they could just be, they're drowning in business, in commerce. Everything is about business, negotiation, money. Everything is about that. So what happens is, because they're not associated with religion, there's an assumption that that may be the cause for my restlessness. So you see, people then assume that the reason for this restlessness is my distance from religion. Now don't get me wrong, I'd like to add a caveat here. Not all businesses or not all occupations are the same. Some may trigger more heightened angst than others. So for example, you could be a doctor, which could be very stressful, but it's also kind of rewarding. Because but then you might be fed up with the bureaucracy. But being an actor or being somebody in an entertainment industry, there's always a huge facade anyway. It's all about, it's deceptive, it's never really true, you're always being fake, you're always being constantly fake to the public. And everybody behind the scenes is always kind of cutthroat. In any kind of entertainment industry, you can imagine that people will always be cutthroat behind the scenes. They'll be very cruel, there'll be very kind of there'll be a lot of bickering, a lot of poison, a lot of toxicity. So living in that for a young person would be much worse than just being in let's say, completely submerged in business. But still, any kind of field that you're submerged in, and if you feel the angst, you may think the reason for this is my distance from religion. And a lot of people do that, and they then completely give up everything to come to kind of embark on this ship of religion. Now, the issue is, any kind of sudden whole transition will always bring some peace of mind. So when you make a transition, like let's say you take people like Cat Stevens, Yusuf Islam, when he made a transition from being a kind of a huge, massively popular singer into Islam, into a spiritual path, naturally any kind of transition into something spiritual will bring some sense of calm. That's inevitable. But the question is, 1 year from today, 2 years from today, that angst will return. Because that angst is part of the journey. We have to understand that we are this kind of, this trouble that we carry with us. This is part of being human. This is that restlessness that Allah has placed within insan. You know, that Allah mentions that we have created insan min ajal. That he's created from this kind of unease. And will never truly, I mean, maybe some people in life, a minority of people, will be at absolute peace. But this is part of the journey, and that sense of I need a goal, or I need something. I mean, that can be a good thing. It can drive us towards something. But I feel, this is my personal thought, I feel that sometimes this ship of religion that we think is the salvation isn't necessarily what it seems to be. It is often a mirage. That said, I want to clarify here that yes, some industries are more ruthless than others, and some industries are very toxic. So I can imagine that the entertainment industry is very highly toxic compared to something like being in the medical industry, which I still believe would be toxic, but maybe not as toxic as. So some are more than others. So I accept that if you calm down in whatever you're doing, you will always find a sense of peace. But is it that by jumping on, like I gave the example of Cat Stevens, who many decades later then resorted to music, and I think I think personally it's a great job that he went back to music, but it's a shame that he could have conveyed his message to millions. I mean, when he left the music industry, I never used to listen to him. I mean, I probably wasn't born at that age when he was in his peak. But I feel that at that stage he had millions of fans who, I don't mean preaching, but just a human message to them. He could have worked wonders. But now when he returned to music, I'm sure most of his fans from that age have either probably, they must be really old and they don't really constitute that scene anymore. So, and the younger people don't know who he is, and things have moved on. So I don't know. I think these things are tough decisions for people. Personally, I would have thought that it's probably better to to keep representing Muslims, to be a part of a certain industry, and to show, if you can, obviously, if the toxicity levels are unbearable, then that's fine. But I would feel, because there are many Muslim actors in Bollywood, and India is becoming, unfortunately, increasingly divided and furiously fundamental with its hate crimes towards Muslims. You know, may Allah grant ease to all Muslims. I mean, I personally think India is a great country. I would love to visit India, but I don't I don't know how they would take to me, but because of the ethnic, you know, divide. But I think India is amazing, but I'm so disappointed in the kind of fundamentalism that seems to be sweeping the country. This fire of hatred against Muslims, and they seem to be lynching Muslims. There was another just recently, another killing in India over, you know, attacking a Muslim, and all these things. And I think that these people who represent Muslims, like I think the three Khans in the industry, in their industry, have done massively for giving Muslims some representation, even though they're not very religious people. But still, they've brought that name, that face, and they do speak. Sometimes I've heard Shah Rukh Khan speak about Allah and speak about Islam in his own way, but at least somebody's doing something. And I don't know, I feel that does a lot more benefit. There is a hadith where it's transmitted in a few books, and namely what comes to my mind is Imam Tahawi brings it as well in his Mushkil Athar, discussing it, that you have a hadith that the Prophet said that a time will come when a person will take his sheep and flock with them to the mountains, and he will kind of isolate himself from people because he feels that people have become too corrupt. But the Prophet said, but the blessed people in that time are those men yukhalitun nas, those who mix with people despite their corruption, who settle with them and yet hold on to some understanding of the faith, even if it is compromised. But I feel that, you see, being human, we are human by our social connection, and that, you know, that you may not be a Muslim, and you may be, you know, this person may be a Christian, this person may be Jewish, this person may be a Hindu, this person may be an atheist, that I'm a Muslim, that we can coexist, that I can express this understanding of Allah to them, show them this journey that I think many people have struggled and failed. And this is what I feel was the true only message of Islam, was to show people that God, which you think is an impersonal God, is actually a personal God, and to bridge that gap. Because people believe, because the Arabs and other people believe that God, yeah, he created the world, but what will he do with us? He doesn't want to know us. He's too transcendent. But bridging that divide between the impersonal to the personal, that Allah, he is Arhamur Rahimin with you, that he is, that bringing him back into our lives. I think that, to me, that is probably a much greater step. Not to say that people need to do, you know, if they feel something is too toxic for them and they want to take a step, it's their lives, they can do whatever they please. But that's my thoughts, and I want to also emphasize this point, you know, that look, we all feel this turmoil. You know, it's like I was responding to somebody messaging me from Kashmir actually today on this issue, and I mentioned this line of Ghalib, that this restlessness, be khudi be sabab nahi Ghalib, kuch to hai jiski pardadari hai, that this restlessness is not without any reason, Ghalib, that there is something that we're onto, that this is a cover for, a veneer, that insan, you know, we have this within us. And I think that this, and coming back to what I said earlier on, I think sometimes this restlessness that we have, it can lead to a sabotaging kind of aside to us as well. And this, what some Muslims will, in Muslim culture, that they will divide between the nafs, you know, stemming from the Quran, quoting Yusuf alayhi salam, وَمَا أُبَرِّئُ نَفْسِي. You know, I don't justify or claim innocence for myself, for my nafs. إِنَّ النَّفْسَ لَأَمَّارَةٌ بِالسُّوءِ. That the nafs is something that will just always drag me down. It will make me kind of sabotage things. So you have, even if you look at psychology, people like Freud looking at the id, the ego, and the superego, dividing these things into that kind of nafs, that same sabotaging kind of culture, something that drives you. And in psychoanalysis, Freud spoke of what is come to be known as the death principle and the pleasure principle. So the pleasure principle is what drives us, and the death principle, it's this restlessness that we have. And the irony is that the restlessness will only stop once we're dead. It doesn't, see, that's the irony. So it's that, hence it was kind of termed the death principle. It kind of drives people to there. And we see that in other cultures, even that have then made gods out of this. Like if you look at Hinduism, the trio that they have, the main, you know, Brahma, Vishnu and Shiva, that you will see that the creating God, the God that puts something into existence, Vishnu, the one who preserves, but then Shiva, the destruction, like the sabotaging, because you can see how humans have projected this feeling out there onto things that, and you've got the line of Ghalib where he says, it slipped my mind, but he has a beautiful line as well, speaking about how up until that, as long as a person has life, he will always have this kind of struggle, this gham. Okay, now we may think that, look, once I have this, it will all go away, but it will still be there. You know, some people think, oh, once I find the perfect partner, then my life will be beautiful and it'll be amazing. But that once I have the perfect job, then it will be amazing. You know, once I have the... And like that, life goes on, you see, with these mini token victories. But the truth is that struggle is part of life. That whole, you know, it's part of being human. It's human or too human. So I think we don't need to, sometimes it is troubling. It is, you know, and we all go through it. I go through it. I go through it. People I know truly that would be honest with me, they go through it. I think maybe I feel it calms down a bit. I feel it's not as bad now as it was before when I was going through a lot. So I think it's not something to be afraid of. Okay. And embrace. And when I've been asked for advice, I've said maybe, you see, for me it was about seeking knowledge. Why? Because knowledge will always keep developing. It will always keep, as you are developing. So it's a true companion. You know, whereas if you set a goal on a person, then people may not be, you know, this like, people, like I said, people say if we're a couple, if I find the perfect partner, then we're awesome. But then you're developing at different stages. So you will then 5 years from today may be a different person. And that couple hasn't moved on. And this is another issue with today's social media. You know, I see on Instagram all these perfect, amazing, you know, the other day I was on Instagram and I saw these, it comes up on your kind of the feed thing. Amazing kind of photos of these couples, and you'll see beautiful pictures of what look like glamorous, amazing couples. And the issue is that really this kind of a lifestyle, the problem with it is it's always fake. Like, and I don't mean that they don't have, I'm sure, I hope that all these couples do have, you know, love and affection. But it becomes about just showing the world. And then you become known as that. But deep down you're struggling. You're struggling with this reality, you're struggling with conflict, you're struggling with your own angst and anxiety. So, yeah, I just feel that, and I kind of feel for sometimes people like that. I see it and I think, damn, this is just this is just a car crash in slow motion. You know, because these things are unsustainable. It's like that Hasanat thing, you know, it's all about the amazing couple that they were, or then the amazing triangle that they were. The amazing Bermuda Triangle that they were. Yo Hasanata. So, right, and on that note, there was Mufti Menk in his live had said, I'd never ever met Abdullah. And then somebody's released the photographs where they're standing together taking photographs. I thought, wow, internet is a true haramia. I thought Mufti Menk must be thinking, now what to do? Toba, toba, toba. Zalim dunya hai. Papi sansar, people. Papi sansar. Right, people. With that, I'm going to leave you to it. Have an awesome, inshallah, week ahead of yourselves. Take very good care of yourselves. Remember me in your kind du'as. And if anything, do an act of kindness towards humanity. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.